Welcome to this special edition of The Breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson. And we have a really special guest tonight. Fantastic. I can't wait for this conversation. He's written several books. Scott Galloway is someone who is fascinating and intriguing to listen to and to read about. So we're going to bring him in a second. But first, I want to mention to everyone, Rick, guess what? We got another January 6th hearing coming up.
Yes,
we finally
do.
got a new date for it. Next Thursday, the 13th. So, of course, you can come to LPTV. We will be covering it live, and we will be doing our usual post-hearing coverage live, Rick and I. So make sure you tune in for that. Latest January 6th hearing, October 13th. Now, Rick, I know this when you saw that Scott was writing a new book, you said, "What? We got to go get Scott Galloway." And we managed to get him. Our crack team was able to get him. He's in high demand. You guys have probably seen him all over the place. He's been everywhere from CNN to Bill Maher, promoting his new book, Adrift, America in 100 Charts. And we are thrilled and just lucky to have him tonight with us on The Breakdown. Scott Galloway, welcome to The Breakdown with me and the Rick Wilson.
Thanks. And by the way, your crack team just sent me an email that had the Lincoln Project on it, and I responded yes.
That's what we like to hear.
I appreciate the illusion of scarcity, but you kind of had me at the Lincoln Project and a chance for me to talk about my favorite subject, me. So, anyways, yeah, what a thrill. What a thrill. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled that you're a fan of ours. The mutual respect is going around tonight. For those who don't know, though, you are a professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. You co-host the very popular New York Magazine podcast Pivot with Kara Swisher, who has been on with us before. She's amazing. I really enjoy her podcast about Succession. We're big Succession fans around here. It's a great show. But like I said, you are now the author of a #1 New York Times bestseller currently out, Adrift, America in 100 Charts. And we want to get right into the conversation. Why 100 charts?
Well, just first off, I don't know it's #1 in New York Times, but between your lips and God's ears. But unless you know something I don't, they haven't released the list of bestsellers. But I like your
we're
the way
projecting
you
it
think.
for you. We're projecting future New York Times bestseller. There
you go. So look, we've had an alphabet for 1,500 years. We've had images for 15 millennia. Whether it's interpreting the drawings on the cave walls, telling us, whether threats over the hill, or trying to figure out when we should plant crops by the shape and height of the sun in the sky, we can interpret images 6 to 60 times faster than words. So any good academic or consultant or storyteller will use images before they use words, if they can use images. So this felt like an easy way to combine a story and to bring home just the scale of some of these issues and also some of the opportunities with images. And I've run strategy firms, consulting firms, and been an academic for 20 years. So I'm always asking, can we say something with a chart or an image? Because it just resonates more emotionally with people. So that was the easy part, finding 100 charts. The hard part was chunking them and creating an arc and a narrative that was actually coherent and told a story.
Well, go ahead, Rick.
Scott, I think you've said a lot I listen to you guys a lot on Pivot and elsewhere, and you've talked a lot about the sort of the crisis points in America right now of the issues with younger men feeling disenfranchised and being lost. A lot of this economic chaos we're in terms of consolidation that's gone out of control, and I'm fascinated by everybody likes doom. But I want to go counter to my own brand a little bit. What do you see as forces that are more uplift and more optimistic right now in the 100 charts and in the space where America's at right now?
Yeah, thanks. That's a generous question, Rick. And my first book, The Four, which was about big tech, started out as a love letter and ended as a cautionary tale. And the more I research these companies, the more kind of worried or concerned I became. This was the opposite experience. We all know about income inequality. We're starting to learn more about failing young men, polarization. But as you really uncover and think about our problems, the bad news is they're all of our making. The good news is they can all be unmade. And I think there's an illusion of complexity and intractability, that these problems, the entrenched beneficiaries, the incumbents, will look at income inequality, or they'll look at failing young men, or they'll look at polarization of media, they'll look at teen depression, and they'll say, these are issues that are just too complex to handle. Meta will claim that teen depression and a young girl committing suicide because she's been exposed to images of razor blades and nooses and pills at the age of 14, and that Pinterest sends her an email saying, here's a page on suicide with images of suicidal imagery. This can be stopped. The smartest people in the world can figure out when a teenage girl is going down a rabbit hole around depression. They know she's 14. They know she might be more subject to self-harm. And when she's viewing images for hours on end in the AM hours where she's probably alone, they know that's happening. And what these companies do is create this illusion of complexity such that they can delay and obfuscate what are problems that can be solved. And we're talking about the realm of the profitable, not the realm of the possible.
Right.
We know that GDP in America, or the wealth of people under the age of 40, has been cut from 19% of GDP to 9%, because we have decided to pass tax legislation where the two biggest tax deductions are mortgage interest and capital gains. Who owns homes and stocks? People my age. Who rents and makes their money working? Younger people. So we can undo all of these things. Why at 99% do we have a progressive tax structure, and then you get above 99 and it plummets and becomes a regressive tax structure? Because we have taken the tax code from 400 pages to 4,000, and wealthy people have the ability to navigate by starlight and can navigate these loopholes, and our tax structure goes negative. That was a conscious decision we made. When we let tuition, me and my colleagues let tuition go up 1,400%, and pursue a luxury positioning and a rejectionist positioning where we applaud the dean and encourage him or her to take admissions rates or rejection rates from 24% when I applied. They used to be 76% admissions rates, down to 94% rejection or 6% admission. That's a conscious choice me and my colleagues and the alumni of the University of California have made. We can undo all of these things. We have solutions to all of these problems. That's the good news. And then the most hopeful chart in the book is that if you look at the amount of time people are spending helping other people, it has dramatically spiked up in every region of the world. In every corner of the world, more people are planting the trees of which the shade they will never sit under. And that is very hopeful.
That's important, I think, because, with all the doom and gloom, to Rick's point, that we deal with every day, and facing the challenges to our democracy and just the polarization and tribalism and the more divided our country seems to be, it's important to have that hope. It's like the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars. It's like you've got to have that hope, or else all this fighting is for naught. There was some really interesting a lot of very interesting facts and charts in your book. And one of them that I thought was one of the more important ones, which is kind of trying to get to the crux of, like, why are we going in this direction? Why are we so adrift? And you talk about focusing on men, and that we have really lost focus on actually two big things: young men and our interaction as people, because of social media and diminishing friendships and our involvement in our communities and things like that. Can you talk about why you are so focused on the middle class and men, and why you think that is really at the heart of kind of why we're going astray here?
There's no cohort that has fallen further faster than young men. 3 times more likely to be addicted, 4 times more likely to commit suicide, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. Our educational system is biased towards girls. And once we leveled the playing field of education, girls blew past boys. And there's some biological reasons. Men's or boys' prefrontal cortex doesn't evolve as quickly. So when 2 high school seniors are applying to college, generally speaking, a girl and a boy, the girl who's 18 is competing against a 16-year-old in terms of executive function. The cerebellum and the frontal cortex. 7 to 10 high school valedictorians are girls. 70 to 80% of elementary and high school teachers are women. And it's understandable that they're going to identify with girls and champion them on a behavior adjusted basis. If 2 kids are called into the principal's office for the exact same infraction, The boy is twice as likely to be suspended. The black boy 5 times as likely to be suspended. Once someone is suspended twice, they're probably not going to college. There's also, and I think this is one of the wonderful things, is when I first talked about this 2 years ago, and I remember that I went on Smirconish to talk about it, anytime you brought up the notion of being, thinking about advocating for young men, you were immediately seen as being anti-women. And that's not true. You know who wants more economically and emotionally viable men?
Women.
Women.
Yeah.
Specifically mothers. And I get emails, and I realize this is pulse marketing, from mothers saying, my daughter's at Penn, my other daughter's working in PR in Chicago, and my son is in the basement vaping and playing video games. The attack on Salman Rushdie wasn't about the fatwa. It was about a young man living in his mother's basement. We know who mass shooters are before we know who they are. So
Unfortunately, yeah.
And then that begs the question, well, what are some solutions? I don't think, so when 40 years ago, when college attendance was 40-60 female male, now it's 60-40, and it's actually worse than that because men drop out at a greater rate. For every one male college graduate over the next 5 years, there's going to be 2 female college graduates. And the knock-on effect there around mating is that women, and we don't like to talk about this on the left, mate socioeconomically horizontally and up, men horizontally and down. The bottom line is a woman college grad isn't interested in dating a man who doesn't have a college degree. So we have lower household formation, we have a ton of shame, and we have 1 in 3 men under the age of 30 haven't had sex in the last year. And people hear the term sex and their brain fires different ways. But here's the bottom line. It's a key step to the elemental foundation in happiness and any society, and that's relationships. And we are producing too many of the most dangerous person in the world. And that is the most violent, unstable societies in the world have too many of one type of person. And that's a broke, lonely young man.
Yep.
And we are producing too many of them. And also the thing that's really holding this discussion back is there are a series of thinly veiled misogynists on TikTok claiming to be pro-men who are not pro-men. They're anti-women. And so when people try to have an intelligent conversation around leveling up young people, and I think we need massive investment in expansion of freshman seats, vocational programming. 50% of Germans have some sort of vocational training. It's only 5% in America. At any given time, 33 out of 1,000 people in the UK or Germany have the title apprentice. In the US, it's 3. We need to make a massive investment in terms of education, tax policy, to level up all young people, of which we don't need more white men in college. We need more people of color. We need more women, and we need a lot more men. We need to just level up young people. I think that's something everyone can get behind, because I think the additional investment and focus on young people will kind of disproportionately help young men who have sort of fallen off at the margin over the last 20 or 30 years. I think it's a huge issue for us.
Scott, one thing you just mentioned in passing there, and it's something that I'm rather obsessed about now. I think one of the things that really started to break us in 2015 and 16 was what I call the twin sewage pipes of Fox and Facebook in minds of boomers who built their own little media bubble. But you mentioned TikTok, and I look at TikTok, and I think we agree on this. I think TikTok is a proximate threat to American democracy and security. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your take on it as well, because I think I've heard you talk about it a little bit, and it's just one of those things that is ringing alarm bells with me at every level.
I'm sure for more than one reason, Rick, besides the Chinese national security threat of it. But, and Scott, just before you answer that, I did see you on Real Time with Bill Maher, where you said you'd rather give your 14-year-old daughter a bottle of whiskey, and I think a joint, than allow her on social media.
On Instagram, yeah.
On Instagram.
That made it on late night in a bad way. Look, with respect to TikTok, I've come full circle, and I think we're brothers from another mother on this now, Rick. I think I saw some of your content, and I've come full circle on this. And that is, if you believe that it's difficult to separate a Chinese company from the CCP, where they can disappear a CEO for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally, imagine if Jeff Bezos started criticizing Biden and disappeared for 4 weeks, and then showed up 4 weeks later and said, I'm no longer going to say anything about politics. I've taken up painting. That is literally what happened in China.
I think Donald Trump was attempting to do that with Bezos during his presidency, but
I think he
failed.
would have liked it.
Yeah, he would have
So,
enjoyed that.
if you believe that the CCP, the separation between the CCP and Chinese companies is fairly thin, which I believe, and if you believe, and if you acknowledge that American kids under the age of 18 are now spending more time on TikTok than they're spending on all streaming media combined, and you also believe that the Chinese CCP has an interest, a strategic interest, in destabilizing or diminishing our power relatively geopolitically, I can tell you what I would do. I would say, well, we can spend hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars over the next 10 years building kinetic power to counter US influence, or we just elegantly, insidiously, quietly put our thumbs on the scales of content that is a little more anti-American than pro-American. Everyone on this pod right now puts out content that is very pro-America and also content that highlights some of the big issues we face. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't it be really easy just to put more pressure, have the algorithms prefer or opt for content that says elections are weaponized, that racism hasn't gotten any better, that it's getting worse, that there's a war on young people, and there's a kernel of truth in all of this. Fox and CNN will produce all the content they need. Sure. Joe Rogan, I mean, everyone produces this content. They'll just increase the ratio, and I think they can raise or help raise a generation of Americans, of future civic, military, nonprofit, and business leaders that, quite frankly, just don't feel great about America. And the thing is, the ultimate sting is the mark never knows they were conned. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think they're capable, just as Meta was the ultimate espionage tool. I believe the reason that we have not broken up Meta or come down on them harder is that the senators in these public hearings have their camera moment to get mad at Cheryl or Mark, and then they go into a confidential hearing, and Mark says, hey, do you want us to continue to track the Instagram feed of Taliban leaders' nieces and aunts such that you can drone them? And they say, yeah. And they say, okay, then back the fuck off on this antitrust stuff. Yep. And I think that's the implicit agreement we have with our big tech firms.
That's interesting. That is very interesting.
What we don't realize is just how much it's the ultimate espionage tool. The GRU, the Mossad, the CIA, the NSA couldn't have come up with Meta in its wildest dreams. This is the propaganda weapon, a Trojan horse the size of Canada. Mm-hmm. And to not think, I mean, they would be stupid not to do that. So my view is, look, this, and by the way, this doesn't let Facebook off the hook. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We should still hold these firms accountable and talk about privacy. But unless we can separate this company from its ownership, I don't think it should be in the US. I think this is something that I think Donald Trump got right, at least strategically, that there's an asymmetry. Just on a trade level, should they have unfettered access to our youth and our markets with their big tech platforms, and we have none?
Correct.
They won't. By the way, the equivalent of TikTok in China is all about pianists. It's all about academic achievement.
That's right.
It never talks about politics.
Right. Take up engineering, everybody.
Yes.
100%.
That's
so
right.
I think I'm with you, Rick. I believe I think this is an existential security threat. Now, I'm a capitalist. I think the good people at TikTok, I think they would actually like to see a wall here. And I think they deserve to have Gulf Streams and homes in the Hamptons. I think they've built an unbelievable product. I think they should get rich. But I think it needs to be spun to American interests, and we need to have American regulation and the data on American servers. Otherwise, it just shouldn't be on our shores.
100%.
You bring up the point about being a capitalist, and I've heard you often talk about the importance of capitalism, but with empathy. And you talk about capitalism on the way up and socialism on the way down. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So typically what happened is capital, our quote unquote most productive people who take risks and build capital infrastructure, a factory, intellectual property, and they make a lot of money. A crisis comes along, and there's usually a rebalancing of power or capital. And then as the factory gets bombed, or there's a pandemic, and business owners go out of business, but labor is still needed to rebuild the factory or to house or to staff the hospital, and there's a little bit of a rebalancing of power. What happened in the last pandemic is we decided that 1 million people dying is meaningfully bad. But if the NASDAQ went down, it would be profoundly tragic. And so we issued $6 trillion. And not only did we not pay for it, our grandkids are going to have to pay for it because it's all been paid for in debt. And we went and bailed out everyone from Delta Airlines to Shake Shack under the auspices of this cartoon of the cupcake bakery owner that just needed a little help to get to the other side.
Right.
And this is the reality. The wealthiest cohort in the history of this planet are small business owners in America. And occasionally they run into existential threats and they go out of business. And when you save the restaurant of the baby boomer who's 55, you're robbing opportunity from the recent graduate of the Brooklyn Culinary Academy who wants to come in and buy that space and those pots and pans for pennies on the dollar. Unless you let the gale force winds of disruption howl, that's not capitalism. When the reason I'm economically secure is because in 2008, with the great financial recession, they let Apple and Amazon stocks fall 60, 80, 90%. And I was just coming into prime income earning years. And it sucked to be already rich if you own those companies. But I got to buy them at 80% off and then ride it up. So what we've decided now, effectively, America has used to be the best place to get rich. Now it's the best place to stay rich. So $1 in $3 in circulation now have been printed since COVID. So one, I don't think these bailouts should have been nearly as extraordinary as they were. We spent 27% of GDP, most nations between 17 and 23. And we have to ask ourselves, all right, if you have rugged individualism, pull yourself by your boots, the CEOs of airlines should get to capture the gains they've made. I don't have a problem with that. That's capitalism, the Hunger Games. I get it. There's an advantage of that. They pay themselves $150 million, the three CEOs of the largest airlines for the 5 years pre-pandemic. They take 93% of their cash flow and buy back stock, which inflates their compensation because stock goes up. And then shit gets real in a pandemic. And all of a sudden they decide they're socialists. We're in this together. Right. We're in this together, and bail us out. And here's the thing. I think socialism has a lot of merit as a construct. I don't like it, but I get it. I get it. But if you have capitalism on the way up and then socialism on the way down, you don't have either. What you have is cronyism.
Right.
And essentially what we've decided in our world, in America, is that we want to keep Nana and Pop-Pop rich, even if it reduces opportunity for young people. Exactly. So this, again, America has become the best place in the world to stay rich.
So fair to say you're not a fan of quantitative easing.
That's fair. I'll give you that. That's fair.
Also, those are like the political third rails of, of politics, where if you, God forbid, you talk about not keeping the baby boomers and grandma and grandpa rich and comfortable, reforming Social Security and, entitlement programs. Oh, no, we can't talk about that because those people vote. And they're saying that the young folks don't. But we're starting to see that that's changing. Obviously, millennials are now becoming the largest voting bloc in the country over baby boomers. And so I think that there's a certain lack of political astuteness here, taking for granted the younger generations and focusing on what's important to them.
I'd like to think that's true. I haven't seen a lot of evidence of it. 50% of America is under the age of 38. 5% of our elected representatives are under the age of 38. Mm-hmm. We have people who are too old running for president. That's an ageist statement. And you know what? You know who else is ageist? Biology.
Yeah.
We just shouldn't have people this old making these decisions. We shouldn't have. Look at Khomeini in Iran. We have people that are in cognitive decline, are totally out of touch with the realities that face the majority of America. They've aged out. I mean, haven't you had those moments? I'm 57 where you're like, I don't even know what I don't know. Because when
I'm 58, and it's like one of the things about TikTok that bothers me is I
can't use it. I figured it out. Yeah, I feel like
I'm 47 and I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I feel like when I'm on it, I feel like I'm going to slip and break a hip. And here's the thing: our elected populace has never been older. A quarter of them are over the age of 70. And then you talk about presidential politics. Where are the first two states that kind of dictate the presidential election?
They're ancient.
They're the oldest states in the union. So what do you know? No one ever wants to talk about why on earth am I ever going to get Social Security? It's called Social Security tax, not Social Security pension. Why is the wealthiest cohort in the history of the planet, U.S. seniors, getting $1.5 trillion from young people every year?
Yep.
And it's an amazing program. It took senior poverty down like 70. Check that box. We won. anyone in the top half, anyone whose household income is over $1 million, why on earth would they ever get social? I just don't get it. And what we have here is seniors have done a great job of voting and making themselves heard. But we talk about income inequality. That gets a lot of warranted attention. What doesn't get a lot of attention is age inequality. It has gotten the average, anyone over the age of 70 has become 72% wealthier. Not anyone, as a group, people over the age of 70 have become 72% more wealthy in the last 40 years. Anyone under the age of 40 has become 24% less wealthy. And people talk about network effects and globalization. What bullshit. We made these decisions.
No,
we made these decisions.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And why? Old people vote. Good for them. The first races are in old states. So we cater to this. And also baby boomers, which I'm not quite a boomer. I'm almost there. We're just not making the same investments in the middle class that previous generations have made. We're not investing in infrastructure. We invest a tenth on a per capita basis in infrastructure as China. China's brought 500 million people into the middle class. We've lost 10 or 20 over the last several decades, and we're going to lecture them. Anyways, I think that there's something, I don't know if it's selfishness. I don't know if it's weaponization of government by rich people who tend to be older. But if you really want to talk about inequality, look at people under the age of 40 and how they've done the last 40 years, and look at people over the age of 60 and how they've done the last 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really, even after years and years and years of being a Republican consultant when I was a Republican and working basically for a lot of these corporate interests that shaped the tax code, the thing that gave me like the shock moment was in 2017 when they're negotiating the Trump tax cut. And I knew a friend who was a lobbyist literally sitting in Mitch McConnell's office working out the details. And I said, come on, dude, tell me there's something in here, some middle class uplift here. And he goes, fuck out of here. He goes, this is for about 150 high net worth individuals and firms. That's it. We're done.
All you need to know was the salt tax. The fact that
I was just like, okay, well, there we have it. And, you know, the scales fell off my eyes a bit, and call me a naive young dreamer, but I mean, it was that iterates out to all these other policy decisions that have, as you said, you know, it made a generation extraordinarily wealthy with a price tag that rolls down the demographic hill, not up.
People complain about high taxes. Government requires 23% of GDP to operate.
Yep.
And when you have deficit spending like we have, you could argue that's 21%. So the average tax rate on people should be about 21%. So say corporate taxes were 30% and anyone making over $1 million had to pay 30%, that would take the average tax rate of all Americans down to 15. Mm-hmm. What we don't realize is it's not tax rates that's killing everybody. It's loopholes. And I'll use myself as an example. I've started businesses my whole life. I've had a lot of failures. I've had a decent number of successes. My last firm was a success. And the first 10 million in proceeds to me of the sale of my company was tax-free.
Right.
That makes no sense. And I'm not going to, people say, well, Scott, just write a check to the government. I'm not going to disarm unilaterally. I was thrilled to hear about it. But why? And then people say, the argument will be, well, Scott, as an entrepreneur who takes huge risks, you're our most productive citizen, we need to encourage you to start a business. I don't know a single entrepreneur that could tell you the taxes at the time they start a business. That's not why we start businesses.
No, we want to do something.
I hope that someday all of us have someone who loves us as much as Kristen Sinema loves private equity. The wealthiest cohort, literally the wealthiest people on the planet, U.S. private equity, it's like a tiny number of people, and they need to pay lower taxes than anyone working at these firms. These are conscious decisions we've made. The tax rates in America kind of go back to Herman Cain or Ross Perot.
Right.
The tax code has gone from 400 pages to 4,000. And when you can navigate by starlight, you want to run races at night. So make the tax codes complex, and people of my economic weight class can hire really smart people to navigate them and figure out a way to lower my taxes. It is a war on the middle class. The IRS can now automate simple taxes. So what does that mean? Audit rates for lower and middle income households have skyrocketed. But higher income taxpayers, their tax returns are so complicated that you need a team of IRS auditors, so they don't audit as often. So there seems to be a lack of empathy here that, okay, stop, it hurts so good. unless people start raising their hands saying, no, the middle class put us on the moon. The middle class fights our wars. The middle class will always pay the majority of our taxes. If we don't make forward-leaning investment in protecting and investing in the most noble entity in the history of mankind, the U.S. middle class, things are just going to get worse here. And people, I think a lot of people believe that, but they're ineffective. The reality is every year, more and more advantage goes to not even the 1%. And here's a myth, and I realize there's a word salad. 98, like that on a tax basis, it's kind of simple to think, okay, the poor are getting screwed, the middle class screwed, and the rich are doing really well. It's more nuanced than that. Mm-hmm. The ones who have, relatively speaking, done the worst from a tax code perspective are what I refer to as the workhorses. And that is people who make between 200 grand and $1 million a year, played by the rules, great education, work their asses off, super successful. Mom's a partner in a law firm, dad's a chiropractor, they make $700,000 a year, they're killing it. Usually to have that kind of income, you need to live in a metro, an urban area in a high tax city. Those people are typically paying 47 to 53% of their income in tax.
That's right.
And it's not until you make the jump to hyperspace and can start saving and investing millions of dollars in assets, then your taxes plummet. But the workhorses, and for good reason, no one feels sorry for them, but they're the ones that have really drawn the short straw. In terms of taxes, lower income people pay more on usage taxes, but federal taxes that haven't gone up much. Middle class has stayed kind of even. But the workhorses who make good money, but not amazing money, they're paying more than half their income to the government.
You make a point about the even with the middle class being kind of falling behind, that who people admire has changed incredibly too. That it used to be astronauts and the workhorses of the world who were innovators and creating things, or just admirable professions. Now it's big tech CEOs who make billions of dollars and really don't give a shit about the rest of society. It's about them getting rich and then taking their money and living on the moon eventually, where you talk about that in your book, which I thought was interesting because it just shows where society is placing its value. And I think that it's misplaced greatly at this point, which is, I think, to one of your points in your book.
As a society becomes wealthier and more educated, church attendance and a reliance on a super being goes down. But at the same time, our questions become bigger and bigger. So we want someone we can look up to as a hero who we believe has better answers than us. And into that void of super beings has slipped the tech innovator. And it's understandable because my iPhone is just staggering how amazing it is. And I don't understand it. It's the closest thing to magic or religion I have as an atheist. And so the person who invented this, who's also fabulously wealthy and also is charming and charismatic and a real innovator, or can land 2 rockets concurrently on barges, they become the new Jesus Christ. And it's important to have heroes. And I don't in any way resent their wealth. What I resent is they can commit securities fraud on Twitter. What I resent is they can call someone a pedophile who's trying to save kids. What I resent is they can use a company like a Kong ball and just mess with it over and over. What I resent is they start believing they can go on CNBC and just lie over and over and no one holds them accountable. So the most loyal Americans in surveys are consistently veterans. The people who have invested the most in America are the ones who are most loyal, are veterans. I find the most blessed Americans, our tech innovators, tend to be the first ones to shitpost government, to say things like government should just get out of the way, or we need an island without the bureaucracy, or they say profane things about our elected leaders. And guess what? If you look up and down the California coast, there are organizations everywhere. In Seattle, go up towards Canada, Seattle, Microsoft, go all the way down to La Jolla, Qualcomm, and then in between you have Google, Meta, SpaceX. You have just incredible firms that have built amazing, Boeing. You get to the Canadian border, and there's Lululemon. You get to the Mexican border, and you got to go 4,000 miles until you hit Argentina, and there's Mercado Libre. Right. Well, guess what? There's a reason you didn't start an EV company in South Africa. There's a reason you're not launching rockets out of Montreal. And that is that these individuals have built a genius layer of innovation on top of amazing staggering middle class taxpayer investments called GPS, DARPA, the US Post System,
the internet,
the space mission. And yet they're the first ones to criticize government. These should be the most patriotic people in the world. They're the first ones to say, okay, I have 60, 80, $100 billion in unrealized capital gains. I'm not only going to move to Texas, which is their right, and pay no state taxes back to the University of California or for the highways or the hospitals that I benefited from, but I'm going to start being critical of California government as cloud cover for why I moved. Show me a tech guy being critical of San Francisco or California, and I'll show you someone who's sitting on top of an unrealized capital gain.
Yep.
I just find it discouraging that these individuals wouldn't be more appreciative and, generally speaking, more patriotic.
Well, Scott, I mean, I think this is a very valuable book. I encourage folks to read it and to internalize it, because we're in a situation where clarity of what faces us as challenges and clarity of what's ahead of us, in opportunity is, I think, both outlined here, and I think folks will really enjoy and appreciate it. Scott, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you
so much.
And thanks for your good work and just being unafraid and telling the truth. I love what the Lincoln Project does. I'm so with you.
How's London, by the way? I heard you moved over.
It is, well, moves to London once the Queen dies and the pound goes to $1.03. It's great. I'm having a wonderful time seeing a lot of Premier League football. My kids are soccer crazy, so it's been great.
Well, make sure you go over
in November for a while, so I look forward to it. But anyway,
and make sure you go over to Lord's Cricket Stadium, because it's one of the best and storied cricket locations. My husband has a cricket clothing line. We're cricket enthusiasts in our house. It's called London Royce Cricket. And when we went to London, we visited Lord's, and the tour guide was shocked, because he said, we don't get very many Americans over here. Most people don't even know the rules of cricket. I said, well, we're a little different, so you gotta check out Lord's.
I will. And Rick, let me know when you're here. I'd love to catch up.
I'll do it, Scott. Yeah, let's do it.
Great.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, guys.
Well, his book is really, really fascinating. And the thing about it is, like, I keep holding it up, because it really is an easy read, because he breaks it down with 100 charts. And it's, very simple, like one-page explanations with the charts. It's easy to digest, and he covers so many different aspects of society that I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and Scott's an enormously interesting thinker,
Yes.
And somebody who really, like, it's an unvarnished thing. He's got a which I think is, like, there's no politics in it. It's just
right. That's correct.
Here we are. Here's the clarity of the solution, the clarity of the problem. I just admire the guy tremendously.
There was a passage in the book that I wanted to ask him that I didn't get a chance to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's in the House of Cards chapter, where he's talking about the importance of really trying to fix this problem we have with young men. But he says that we are divided against ourselves, seeing enemies rather than adversaries in our politics, which I thought was fascinating. He said, this feeds a vicious cycle. As enemies, we cannot negotiate in good faith, and our government accomplishes nothing, which further undermines our faith in government and fuels our hatred for our opponents. That really synthesizes kind of where we are right now. And we desperately need to break that vicious cycle, or else we're doomed, and we don't want that.
True story.
That's right. But he does one of the solutions in the book, where we're talking about hope, is the importance of human interaction, that we have got to get back to speaking to one another, being involved in our communities, the importance of integrating communities. He's saying that that's where you find that common ground, and that in the common good of relationships, of basic community, that's where you start to see a difference.
Yeah.
And I believe that.
I mean, and look, one of the things that we appreciate at the Lincoln Project is that it is a community. It is a movement. It is a citizens movement that emerged from the beginnings of this fight in late 2019, when we kicked it off, to this moment where we're in our second election cycle now, where the stakes are very high. Folks, you got 5 weeks from today.
Yep.
We are in the fight for the majorities in the House, the Senate, and for the most consequential moment we've had in our democratic challenges facing us. We're not that far ahead in these critical races, folks.
That's true.
And it is important to remember. Do not pick out curtains. Run like you're 10 points behind. Fight, fight, fight till the very last. And you have our commitment of the Lincoln Project. We're going to do that. And we can't do this mission without you. We are enormously grateful, and we put it right back to work for every bit of support and donations that we receive. We turn it around. We have the highest ratio of turning donations into action, I think, of any super PAC. We've put out the numbers on it in the past. We'll continue to do that in a matter of transparency. But we're here to push this fight. We're here to win battles. We're here to go ahead and reset how politics worked in this country, which was letting bad guys get away with stuff for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to keep up that fight as long as you keep us in it. So we
That's
appreciate your help. And you can have one guarantee from us: we will never back down from this fight. We are fearless because you're at our backs. We appreciate it, and let's really press hard here, guys. It's going to be a really tough run to the very end here. And I want to beg all of you, as I do almost every time now, please go out and check your voter registration.
Yes.
Make sure you haven't been canceled or removed from the voter rolls, because that's going on in a lot of states. Please check your voter registration. After you do that, I want you to go ahead and get your absentee ballots in as soon as you can. Vote early if you can. It is important. It makes election day a less risky proposition.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of Republicans who should not be as close as they are in these races.
Yep.
And it's up to you, not only supporting us. We can help spearhead this fight, but you've got to take personal responsibility for making sure you are registered and that you are going to vote early, and you're going to make sure that your vote counts.
That's right. And if you can, become a poll watcher,
Sure.
volunteer on election day, or work on a campaign. Try to do something that contributes to helping get the right folks in there. Because believe me, the other side is extremely motivated. They are mobilizing an army of their people, and they're not coming from a good place. They have nefarious intentions, and there needs to be a pushback to that, which is why we do what we do. Also, check out the Union Lincoln Project's curated effort here. It's a clearinghouse if you want to get involved in different types of election or political activity. The Union is the place to go, and they will direct you. Join the union.us. They'll direct you to where your interests are. So it takes us. It does take a village, a community, a state, a nation for us to beat these evil forces back. So on that note, we will see you next week. And remember, like I said, January 6th hearing coming up on October 13th.